Good to be back here. We'll have a chance to cover three major topics. The first one will be the theory of the business cycle, which will be a follow-up to what Professor Victoria Kurzen-Price was covering and was sharing with you. Then there will be one lecture on regulation, taxation, and the overall general effects. And we will conclude tomorrow by an interesting topic called public goods and externalities, something which is very often used by the advocates of big or small state as an excuse to do something. The claim is, yeah, indeed, everybody knows there are things like public goods which cannot be produced privately. Markets are failing, and hence we have to have smart people in the government to provide for us these important and very useful things. And I'll share with you my Austrian-inspired view as a critique of the market, but that's for tomorrow. Yeah, I was introduced here as a new president of a small private college. I brought here for you a couple of brochures for international students so that you can have a look and see where we are, how beautiful our school is, and what courses we offer, and hopefully we might find in this group somebody who can join our students and spend some time in Prague, which is always very enjoyable. But before I got to be a president of that private college, I was a department chairman at a big public school called University of Economics in Prague, and I formed there a department of institutional economics to sort of offer a new approach to economic science, which is non-technical. It has a lot of links to other social sciences such as law, political science, or history. And this is exactly what makes an analysis a realistic economic analysis. And I believe that's also partly the reason why I'm here and why you are here, because you look for an approach to our world, to the problems of our world, which is not a kind of fancy model, but it is something real useful in everyday life. Simply, if economics has to be a relevant science, it must be tied to daily problems. It's for, as Ludwig von Mises used to say, economics is a kind of civic education. It's a duty of everybody to learn how it works, so that you do not believe every myth which many people promulgate and would want you to believe it. Now, the topic of today will, as I said, be a follow-up to topics which you have already covered. Money is a big part of it. Interest, savings and loans is a part of it, and actually the current crisis and the Keynesian solution to the current crisis, which you also covered somehow, is also part of it. So let me present to you my take on the problem. If you kind of feel that this is what you have already heard from Professor Kurzen-Price, just tell me, move on, and I'll skip it and I'll move on. I have many things to say. And the more I can say, the better for you, hopefully. We'll see. You'll tell me. So let me start by a sort of general reminder. Why is it that we have economics as such? And you know very well that the need to have economic science is the underlying scarcity on the one hand, and then the unlimited wishes we have. And because we cannot fulfill all the preferences we have to choose. And economics is here to give us instruments how to choose properly, how not to waste resources. Because if we make bad choices, we will waste resources. This is nothing new. Now, how do we do it? How we do prevent waste? And here, a Hayekian insight, I'm referring to F.A. von Hayek, and perhaps you covered that as well, is that, well, you need to distinguish between the setting. On the one hand, you have small settings, small groups, families typically, and on the other hand, you have something bigger than a family, like our society today, global economy, if you will. Now, how do you prevent waste in a smaller setting, such as a family? Well, there you know how much money, for example, you have, what kind of resources do you have available. And you also know what members of your family, what they like. So you have direct knowledge of both ends of the problem, scarcity and preferences. So for example, if you wish to buy a good present to your parents for Christmas, you can pretty much do it. You need to economize. Even here you can waste money and buy something stupid. But you have very good reasons to buy a good present because simply you have direct knowledge. You know them and you know what you have, right? So economizing can take place here based on direct knowledge of the world. On the other hand, if we move away or out of the family, you lose this. You lose direct knowledge about pretty much everything. You don't really know what is the scarcity of stuff you use. You do not really know for whom you produce, for example. So, as Hayek explained, in such a broader setting, you need a source of indirect knowledge to tell you what to do, how to do it, where to do it, what job to accept, what school to study, and so on and so forth. And Hayek explained very nicely, half a century ago, that for this purpose we need prices reflecting the scarcity and the preferences, prices giving us signals, directions, where to move, what to do. Once you have prices, which are necessary outcome of markets, of exchanges, you learn something about the world and you can solve the economic problem. You can allocate scarce resources to the best possible uses, right? Now, Hayek's older colleague, Ludwig von Mises, I'm sure his name also ring a bell. Mises has such a nice sort of saying. He says, prices are eyes and ears of all entrepreneurs. And actually, we all are entrepreneurs because we deal with uncertain future, right? So, in other words, we see the world through prices. Prices are our eyes and ears. Whenever something spoils prices, typically a governmental regulation, it is as if our eyes get a little bit worse. We simply now do not see everything properly. We are more likely to commit mistakes, and hence we are more likely to waste resources and be poorer as a result. This is typically very well understood in many sort of normal markets. Today, pretty much I would say everywhere in the world, it is a common belief that it's good when For example, bread is baked by private competing bakeries because that pushes the prices down and quality up, and we have wonderful bread. If you leave, prices are things which are responsible for it, prices and competition and prices. If you leave it up to the government to provide it, you are very likely to end up by having more expensive bread, if any, and worse bread, if any. Now, so this is about the understanding of the role of prices in the allocation of resources in, let's say, across space or in space. So what to do now? Shall I do this or that? Shall I buy this or that? Shall I work here or there? The dimension which I will be talking today, and what Victoria Curzon Prize talked about, is allocation of resources over time. So what shall I do now versus what shall I do in the future? Right? Shall I invest or save and invest, or shall I consume? How shall I allocate resources in time in order to get as much out of it, as much preferences and wishes satisfied, right? So economic problem in this direction, now versus in the future, versus economic problem here or there, right? Now, the allocation of resources in time is a necessary or appropriate or good allocation of resources in time is a necessary precondition for economic development. Economists very often start with Robinson Crusoe on an island, and to simply show what do we have in mind. And the general idea indeed is, well, if we have Robinson Crusoe on an island and he wants to live a better life, well, he can either work more, catch more fish, but given his technology, he can get better a little bit, but there are some limits. And hence, what economists have been explaining since Adam Smith, that in order for a society, or Robinson, to be richer, to be wealthy, you need to reduce your current consumption. That means save. Why? Because, for example, being a Robinson, if you do not eat up every fish you catch, you put some fish aside. In some time, you accumulate sufficient stock of capital, enough fish, to be used to work on what economists call capital goods. So in order for Robinson to get richer, he needs to accumulate fish so that he has time to work, let's say, on a net. When he is working on a net to be more productive in the future and catch more fish in the future, he doesn't have time to catch additional fish. So while he is working on the net, he must have something to eat. So first you need to put some fish aside, have stock of savings available, then you work on a capital good, on a net, you eat the capital, let's say the fish, you eat the fish and keep working on the net. And if you have enough fish accumulated first so that you can finish up and have a net at the end of the day or week or month, then you start to be really productive. Because rather than, 5 fish a day, you can catch 50 fish a day or 500 fish a day. And this process of savings, investment, capital accumulation, and subsequent growth is a source of economic and consequently social progress. And this needs to be understood. Now, in a small setting, Robinson and fish only in the existence, he has a direct knowledge of what his savings are, right? He can have a look into the barrel and he sees how many fish there is. He has a direct knowledge and hence he can work with it. The same way as if you are buying a present for your parents for Christmas, you see how much money you have and you know what you want to do with it. You know them. So in small setting, the thing is easy in both instances. The problem starts to be bigger or different when you do not have direct knowledge, when you are not Robinson on an island, but you are one of 1 million people in your town or 1 out of 6 billion people on earth. You put some stuff aside, you have some savings, other people have some savings, you use some of your savings and some of other people's savings, you work on some capital goods, on some machines, you build houses, you do something with the savings. And there you do not have direct knowledge. You do not know how many bricks are available, how many of anything is available. You are not really sure, whether you should start building it or not, how big the house or the factory should be. There is a lot of, issues involved. Now, how is it done in a modern, let's say, big society? Well, as in my previous example with allocation of resources within family and outside of family, well, here, if you do not have direct knowledge, you need to have indirect knowledge. That means prices. You see the world through prices. You need to see the world through prices, because if not, you are more likely to, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to behave, you are more likely to commit mistakes, errors. You waste resources, you do stupid things, you invest into something and it doesn't have any meaningful results. And this idea about first allocation of resources over time and the importance of prices in the intertemporal allocation of resources is the essence of a business cycle theory, which first got sketched back in 1912, so almost 100 years ago, by Ludwig von Mises, and for which Hayek got a Nobel Prize in 1974, which was, by the way, 1 year after Mises' death. Mises died in 1973. And the next year, Hayek got a Nobel Prize for what actually Mises came up with, which some people interpret as not coincidence. They say, well, Mises was such a strong critique of the way how modern banking and central banking is done, that he could never ever get a Nobel Prize in economics, because Nobel Prize of economics is not a real Nobel Prize, as you know. It is a prize awarded by the Central Bank of Sweden. And Central Bank of Sweden could never ever give a Nobel Prize to Mises, who knows whether he would accept it or not. So people say, well, they needed Mises to die and give the prize to Hayek because he was also wonderful, but not as critical as Mises was. I don't know whether that is true, but I like to tell the story because, that's a nice story. There could be something to it, even if it is not completely true. Now, the Hayek-Mises theory of the business cycle is something, interesting, based on insights stemming from microeconomic knowledge. That means relevant. It's not some kind of speculation, unemployment, inflation. It's about real people, real actors, real firms. So very realistic. At that time, when the theory got developed, it was the only theory which had microeconomic foundations. And Victoria Curzon Price, I hope, explained that the post-Second World War economics was the area of modern, quote-unquote, economics, macroeconomics, when people, individual players, were treated as if they never existed. So I like to show you a illustration of the emergence of economic crisis based on Mrs. Hayek's theory of the business cycle, as interpreted by a leading follower of those two great thinkers, Professor Garrison, a contemporary economist from the University of Auburn. And it's a nice graphic illustration, and I like it because you can nicely see a difference between this and what you typically find in economic textbooks, things like the Phillips curve. For those of you who do not really know what that means, I'll explain. It's nothing really difficult. So now we need a couple of things to put together. One is what is called the Hayekian triangle, and which is the sort of core concept which always reminds you that you need to see the world through capital and its structure, rather than what is typical for post-Second World War macro as kind of one homogeneous entity which we can denote as K or something. So Hayek said, well, every production takes time. So we have time on one axis, on this axis. We have, well, let me draw it first. So let's have a triangle, and now let's explain what it means. Hayek says, well, if you want to have a finished product, the product must go through different stages. On this axis, we either depict time or stages, like this, and imagine that a new product emerges here, like you need to get coal from the ground, right? So it'll be like mining, for example, here, right? Then, and on this vertical axis, you see the value as the product moves through different production stages. It gets more and more value, and ultimately here you have the value of the final consumption product, right? So time and value, that shows you the stages of production until the ultimate consumption. So you can imagine that this would be like, for example, mining, manufacturing, then let's say wholesale, and the ultimate stage of production is like the sale of the product in a regular shop, right? So in order to get, let's say, I don't know, a computer produced, right? You need first the original resources to be extracted from the ground. Then something must be done with them. Some other must be added. Then it must go through different stages toward the ultimate customer, right? And in order for a computer to be made, there is a long way through which original resources, get transformed bit by bit until you get the final product. If there is a problem somewhere in the middle, you never get it, right? If I don't know, you can extract resources from the ground, but you have no way how to distribute something to the people. If, like, you know, the last part of the production, let's say, line will not be in existence, customers will get nothing, right? And Hayek says, well, the whole essence of capitalism is to have an economy which can allow a product to smoothly go through all these stages, right? Now, perhaps one reference to Robinson Crusoe. Let's have here a little Crusoe triangle where, let's say, catching fish is his production stage in his primitive economy. And when he catches the fish, he gets it. So final product, the value of a fish is here, and this is the only thing what he does with it, catches a fish, right? I said, well, in order for Robinson to get more wealthy, what he needs to do, remember, I said, you need to add a new production stage. He must not only catch fish, he must produce a net, make a net, and then with the net catch the fish, right? So we need here in modern economy something to be added, a net production. I hope you call it in English this way, but you understand what I mean. Net production must be added. How? I said he must put some fish aside. That means he must reduce his consumption. So this, we measure consumption here, so he must decrease his consumption, and, you know, sort of intuitively, this is what he needs to do. The resources must be saved, so not eaten up and transformed into source of investment into a new production stage, right? So a first step for having economic growth is reduction of consumption. That means savings, fish put aside, and then fish used when I work on the next production stage. I'm producing my net so that I'm more productive in the future, but I need something to eat. In order to have something to eat, I need to have the fish to be in the barrel. Because if not, I would be working on my net, but I would be starving to death because I need to eat. So saving, investment, capital production, and then that's my hope that with the net, I get more productive. And once again, without further explanation, you can read about it if you want. Once I have this new triangle here, I hope that I will have more consumption ultimately, which can be depicted in the triangle as sort of expanding triangle this way, right? This will be called economic progress. As again, this is not kind of empirically measured thing. It is the logic that tells you need to see the problem of capital structure. You have to understand that in order to have economic growth, you have to have savings and investment. You have to understand that in order for having savings, you need, for having investment, you need savings. You have to reduce your immediate consumption, right? So this is the Hayekian idea. See capital as not as one big thing, but as a lot of things which have to be connected, because production takes time. A successful product must go through different stages of production. All kind of people must work on the production, people who extract it from the ground, who then work with it, somehow make a product out of the natural resource. So there's a lot of jobs and skills needed, a lot of particular labor markets at a different stage. And if everything works smoothly, you get a computer, a car, a hat, everything at the end of the day, right? So, and I guess the Robinson, example, simple example, can give you an intuition about what it means. Now, Garrison says, well, this is one thing. We take that from Hayek, and that will always remind us we need to see what happens to capital. Now, we need more stuff. Second tool we need, and perhaps that's what you covered with Professor Curzon Price, is you need to see the, this way, the market for what's called loanable funds, the market for investment and savings. The idea is, okay, what matters is the interest rate, which is the price which is shaping the intertemporal allocation of resources. So once again, what we want to talk about is market in time, what to do now, what to do tomorrow, what to do in a month. And the price of this kind of market, or price depicting or characterizing such market, is the interest rate. Now, if we have a look at savings, what can we, how is the connection between savings and an interest rate? Well, the thing is, if the interest rate goes up, people tend to save more, right? If you know that if you put some resources aside today, you get 20% interest, 20% more in a year, you are more likely to save than if you'll be given 1% in a year, right? So there is savings that looks like this, savings, or people who, like, general population, how people behave as savers, right? They save more if they are compensated more, right? The same way as you work more if you get higher salary. So there is this function of savings related to the interest rate. On the other hand, you have investments, typically firms, who have some projects for which they look for funding, right? And here the shape is different. This is investment. Or we can perhaps call it, this can be called supply of loanable funds, right? And this will be demand for loanable funds. So in any case, this is people who save, and this is firms who invest. So if the interest rate is high, then firms would invest only into really profitable projects. If the interest rate goes down, firms can finance by this money less and less productive investment projects, right? Simply, if something will earn you 6% in a year, you are not crazy to finance, to borrow money at 20% or something, right? Simply, the cheaper the money which you can borrow, the more you will invest, right? No big deal. Now the point here is that there is an equilibrium here where the amount saved is equal to the amount of invested. As with every supply and demand, the price as it moves, it encourages one side of the market, discourages the other side of the market. So at some interest rate, all those who are willing to save can save, and the money saved are borrowed by firms, right? So there is a market for intertemporal allocation of capital or loanable funds or savings, and the interest rate is the price which reflects, which sends a signal about the scarcity of the funds which can be used to invest into projects. It tells us about how much people are willing to save, right? And the third thing, and I deliberately draw it in such a manner. So we have the Hayekian triangle, we have the supply-demand of loanable funds, savings, intertemporal market, and we have here something which in economics we call the production possibility frontier. That means a tool which actually tells us that there are always trade-offs. If you want to have more of something, you need to have less of something else because resources are scarce, right? Typically in microeconomics, the idea is, well, you know, let's say, how much, you know, apples and bananas you can have, or you can produce in a given economy. Well, if you produce too many, or if you produce more apples, you can have less bananas, or the other way around, right? You cannot have both in higher quantities because simply there are no resources for having more of everything. Here, what Professor Garrison says, well, let's have investment here and consumption here, and some kind of possibility frontier which is telling you that there is a trade-off between consumption and investment. Simply, if you are Robinson, if you consume everything, if you eat all your fish, you can have no investment. You have no fish left. So sorry, Robinson, you know, net is not possible because you have nothing to eat. So if you eat everything, consumption is this big, then investment is zero. If you start saving, so if you limit your consumption, then some investment is possible. If you invest everything today, you have no consumption, you have nothing to eat, right? So the sort of, in a real situation, you are somewhere in between, right? Now, how much in between you are, where exactly on that line you are, well, this is what the market for loanable funds tells you. So here you have savers and firms, the interest rate, where the level of investment is determined, and hence through the production possibility frontier you can derive, once you know what gets invested, you know what gets consumed, and consumption, I said, was here. It links to the Hayekian triangle, which tells you, okay, if you have such an interest rate, such a level of investment, you need to have such a structure of the economy to be sustainable, so that products can start to be produced, go through the all production stages into the consumption product. You can eat it. The left is invested because you have savings available, right? So this is a scheme that gives you a flavor of what it means to see the economy through the lenses of capital. And that is why the Hayekian Misesian business cycle is called, as interpreted by Garrison, capital-based economics. It doesn't perceive capital as a homogeneous entity. It understands that there is a lot of capital goods, all kind of machines and factories through which a product has to go through in order to become a final product so that you can eat him, use him, and it's somehow connected to the interest rate, to savings, and hence to investment. Now, let's see what happens. What is the analogy to here the Robinson, as he was putting some fish aside, needed to reduce his consumption and so on and so forth, right? Imagine, for some reason, people start saving more, right? The same way as Robinson started not to eat up every single fish he had, but he put some fish aside to the barrel, started to accumulate savings because he knew he can get more productive with the net. When people start saving more, let me use a different marker, then supply of loanable funds or supply of savings shifts. People save more. What it means? Well, the savings are more plentiful. There's more savings. Savings are less scarce. And hence, they get cheaper. As with, I don't know, potatoes. If you have more potatoes one year, their potatoes are more plentiful, they get cheaper. If you have more savings, they get cheaper. Price reflects scarcity. And also, there is now more savings in the economy, and hence there can be more investment in the economy. Right? What it means, through the production possibility frontier, it tells you what the consumption is, how much the Hayekian triangle has to change. So the new level of consumption is this. You save some resources, you do not eat up everything. Your triangle can get longer. The length of production, you can add a new production stage, like Robinson here. So this is what your Hayekian triangle starts look like. It gets flatter. What it means, remember, it's not just a triangle. It tells you what is happening in different stages of production. For example, what it tells you, that the stages which are close to consumption, they need to shrink, right? Because you don't spend on consumption that much as before. So, like some, let's say, shops needs to close down. You are not buying more. You put some stuff aside. So there must be some bankruptcies here. People must be freed to do something useful, what you as a consumer want to do now. Right? You decided to save less. That means save more, spend less, save more. So you actually, by your decision, you bankrupted some firms who were specializing in, let's say, retail. People were freed. Where did they go? In principle, well, by changing your behavior, by saving more, you enabled some entrepreneur to come up with a new production stage. So resources start shifting from stages close to consumption to stages far away from consumption. For example, construction, building of houses, factories. This is what in reality this is, right? So, if people decide to change their allocation of resources in time, if people decide to save more, the structure of the economy must change. Something must go away, something must bankrupt, something new will emerge. A process of creative destruction. And thanks to Hayekian triangle, we kind of feel or understand, how in principle it works, from which resources, from which sectors resources start shifting and to which resources they move. So resources start shifting from sectors that are close to consumption and they move to sectors far away from consumption, such as construction, like in the case of Robinson, right? Fish industry, in his sense, eating fish, the business of eating fish got reduced. The business of producing nets for catching more fish in the future expanded, right? What's true for Robinson here is true for the economy as such, but you do not really see it that clearly as in case of Robinson. So this is all, still the old story, Adam Smith's story. You need savings for investments. You need investments for economic growth. You need economic growth for making your life better. Without savings, just by eating, you don't get, better truly, because you simply eat up everything. So this is a story of economic growth, where you see the link between savings, investments, and link to the structure of the economy. Now, where shall I draw it? I'll do it smaller here. Where is the business cycle? Well, once again, in smaller setting, the same stuff. Supply, demand of loanable funds, as I put it, S and E. Right, just the initial situation once again. What Robinson couldn't do on his island, and what people could not experience until the existence of modern banking, was that they couldn't be confused by prices to the extent people can be confused today. Why? Well, because today in our economy, in every major economy, we have something which Victoria Curzon-Price talked about. We have the banking sector, which is more like a cartel of banks supervised and formed actually by the central bank. So you have a monopolistic institution, central bank, that can legally print money. So you have a monopolist. That monopolist not only prints money, but also gives licenses to those who they like. So they limit competition in the banking sector. Licenses and monopoly in banking business are now in place. For reasons which perhaps Victoria mentioned, central banking emerged not because of some really honorable and nice plans for the future, but the origin was very closely tied to the fact that governments wanted to borrow money for their wasteful spending, and nobody was really willing to lend them money anymore. So that they said, okay, I pick one of the banks, I give the bank a special privilege which nobody else will have. The bank will be an issuer of money, and in exchange for it, the bank will borrow me, or will lend me, I will borrow from the bank. Nice deal, right? Now, what can happen in such a situation is that the central bank manipulates the level of interest rate. After all, this is what they do. And it is today not, by many people, not considered to be anything problematic. We take it as granted. Central bank board met and they decided what the interest rate will be for the next week, month, something, right? Just if you think about it without prejudice, but what is that, right? A central planning committee in the banking business, smart planners meet and decide what they believe is the fine price for the next week for people to play with, right? How much is that different from a central planning committee setting prices of bread, right? Giving their expert views on what is the best price for bread, right? Not really different, I would say. But that's another issue, right? What now matters here is, well, if what they can do is that they can inject money into the economy. And if they inject with the objective to push the interest rate down, and they believe it is good for the economy because money will be cheaper, people will invest more, right? This is what they do. Now, how do we see it here? Well, it looks like this, not different from what it was before, with one exception. Here, the interest rate went down because people started to save more. They changed the preferences, their own preferences. Whereas here, you get something like the original supply of loanable funds by people. They save as before, plus the central bank injected, this is delta M, they injected some money into the economy with the objective to lower the interest rate. They may succeed. So the interest goes down as before, right? But not because people save more, but because there is more money in the economy. They just printed it up. Now what consequences does that have? Well, as I said, people in modern economy see the economic reality through prices. What do you do if you see the price of loanable funds to go down, being a firm? You're happy to borrow more, right? It's cheaper, as before. You actually do not really know whether it is caused by extra money put into circulation or whether it is caused by people saving more. It's just cheaper. We see prices, we see reality through prices, right? So, okay, wonderful. Investors save more. Investors invest more. This is the level of investment. And in the Hayekian triangle sense, it would mean they start building the extra production stage. New factories, new construction starts. Looks fine, right? People have more jobs. You know, GDP might be growing or something like that. Looks fine. Well, the question now, however, is what's the savings in such a picture? Well, we have savings here as well. Yeah, I may have it blue. Savers behave as before. They have not started to save more. With the lower interest rate, actually, they start to save less, right? So the level of savings is here. These are savers. So saving is now less than investment. Meaning what? Meaning that people actually consume more than before. They save less. That means they consume more. So they actually, by buying stuff, they support businesses here close to the consumption. Whereas businessmen, because they invest more, they support businesses here toward the end of, or toward this end of Hayekian triangle, so far away from consumption. What does it mean? Well, it means that investors behave as if it was more savings, more capital, more bricks, more resources put aside. For Robinson, more fish in the barrel, right? Like, don't worry, just keep building the net. There is plenty of fish in the barrel put aside. This is the behavior of investors. The borrowers, like you know, common people, they actually spend more on consumption. It's like Robinson behaving in the way like, oh, I eat more fish today. I feel like not having that much savings, right? So what you see is that there is not compatibility of behavior of investors on the one hand and savers on the other hand. They behave simply in a way which is not compatible. I said resources might shift from some sectors of the economy to other sectors of the economy. Now we have the Hayekian triangle expanding on both sides, as if there was more resources available overall. But that can't be. You cannot have more apples and more bananas at the same time, right? Resources are scarce. So, this, you know, think of behaving differently on both sides of the market actually tells you that it cannot survive, because in order for a product to be consumed at the very end, it has to go step by step through the all production stages. But there is not enough resources to sort of lead our product through all the stages, because there were no resources freed on one side of the economy and kind of sent to the other part of the economy. The economy is somehow trying to get bigger on both ends. It looks fine for some time. That's the boom phase, when these new stages are built and these new capacities are built. But at the end of the day, people figure out that they were just misled by the monetary expansion, which reduced the rate of interest. People figure out that there is actually just more money, pieces of paper that were printed up, but that there is no more bricks, no more real resources, no more labor, no more, anything. So the point is that the investors start new projects, build new factories, but they will not be able to turn them into production facilities because sometimes in the middle, when they are not yet ready and they need more capital, they discover there is no more capital, right? And they say, oh, tough. I have a problem. I can't finish what I started, right? Well, people inspired by the ideas of Hayek and Mises would say, yeah, you are not able to finish what you started because you expanded too much here. You as Robinson, it is as if you were a Robinson, put aside fish for 5 days, and you believed that you have something to eat for 10 days. And after 5 days, you have not yet your net ready, and you have no fish left in the barrel, and you can't finish what you thought would make you more productive. Yeah, because your savings were not sufficient. And the same story is here for the whole economy. You simply discover in the middle that what you started cannot be finished. And now you have a problem. Because people who started to work here in those construction phases of the economy, you have more and more bankruptcies here. You fire them. So what looked fine at the beginning, there are new jobs available, suddenly, the situation changed and you discovered that there was an error to start it, that you have to fire these people. And you have bankruptcies, and you may have bank failures, you have economic crisis. So what people like Mises and Hayek would argue is that the problem starts when many people believe there is nothing wrong. You have like the cycle, you have the boom, your economy goes up, everybody believes it's fine, and suddenly you get a downward sloping development and economic crisis. And many people, Keynesians, for example, would say, oh, this is good, this phase is good, and this downward is bad. Austrians, Hayek, Mises would say, oh, this is actually bad because this is distortion. This is because of the delta M here. This is the stupid decision. This is when resources got used in projects which have no future. Here is a problem, and these bankruptcies are actually good things. This is like telling these people, oh, sorry, people, these nonsensical projects can't be continued. Please go somewhere else and do something useful, because here it's nonsense. You can't make it useful anyhow, right? It is as Garrison and Mises put it. Well, it is as if you have bricks enough to finish 3 houses in the economy, right? And you start building 4 because you are confused by the central bank. You believe there is more bricks in the economy. You start building 4, and suddenly, it gets discovered that there is not enough bricks to finish all 4. But Hayek, Mises, followers would say, yeah, then destroy this one, use the bricks to finish at least, what can be finished. So don't confuse people anymore that there is enough bricks for 4 by printing more money, because printing more money does not increase the number of bricks in the economy. What Keynesians would say, oh, no problem, we'll confuse you a little bit more. We have more delta, I'm here, lower interest rates, behave as if there is plenty of bricks. Believe us, we know it. You know, Paul Krugman, after all, has a Nobel Prize as well. So what? He must know. So, you know, start building the fifth house. That's possible. Don't worry. We'll provide you with capital. And Austrians say, well, you can't provide them with capital because what capital, you know, is, well, what is the sort of good use of capital is the, not capital like the sum of money, but the sufficient structure or sustainable structure of capital goods, machines, factories, that must be by entrepreneurs sort of tied together into a meaningful production, so that you start with something, you move the product through production stages, and you end up by having something useful, right? If you have a wrong structure of capital goods, you know, stupid factories in stupid places. If central bank prints more money, you still have stupid factories in stupid places. Doesn't change anything, right? So the Austrian suggestion here would be, you know, yes, recession, the downward sloping development of, you know, product is useful because it means people are fired here, they lose jobs, and they look for something meaningful somewhere in the structure of in the capital structure. That's good. They got to be fired because they cannot do anything useful here. They work on wrong projects, right? If you keep confusing them, if you increase the monetary expansion, you know, you're sort of telling them, don't worry, be here, work on that'll be fine. We'll get some EU money to fund it or something, right? So this is the essence of the Hayekian, Misesian approach to the business cycle. As I said, what was very new in this sort of perception of economic crisis was the view through capital, structure of capital. They deliberately fought the myth of homogeneity of capital. They said, no, there is actually, capitalism is based on entrepreneurial decisions which make our structure of capital goods meaningful. Right? Now, as I hope I still have some time, the last point I want to make, which one I use, yeah, I can do it here. A sort of similar story told by other economists, famous free market economists, such as Milton Friedman, for example. As you may know, he got his Nobel Prize for explaining the economic phenomena in 1970s, the simultaneous existence of inflation and unemployment. The idea popular in the 50s was, can be characterized what is called the Phillips curve. I hope this is the spelling. Which Phillips was an economist who observed historically a link between unemployment and actually wages, and that got transformed there into the textbook Phillips curve. The idea is the following one. You have unemployment here and inflation P on the other axis. And there is a trade-off here. So let's say if there is zero inflation, there is still some unemployment here. You as a politician, actually, politician who has control over central banks, you can play with monetary policy in order to reduce the evil of unemployment. So what do you do is that you can you can create inflation. So inflation goes up, let's say here, from 0 to 2%, for example, right? So you have higher inflation, so inflation goes up, and unemployment goes down. You have many to choose from, right? It's up to the government to design the economic policy to find an optimal mix of inflation on the one hand and unemployment on the other hand. That looks fine, right? For a politician, you can play with it a little bit here, you have a little bit here, you have a little bit less here, and then actually a kind of crazy view of right-wing, left-wing approaches was the following one, that allegedly the right-wingers do not care about people and about employment, so they prefer, like monetary stability, low inflation, but they are fine with high unemployment, whereas the good people, the commies or social democrats or left wing, they care about unemployment and they do not care about prices, so they would tolerate higher inflation, and that will be the cost for having low unemployment, right? And so anytime unemployment went up, government, according to this idea, could pump up money into the economy, and inflation would go up and unemployment down. Now, in the 70s, as you know, you for some reason had suddenly and unexpectedly for many, you had high inflation and high unemployment. Simply the trade-off, the policy, many disappeared. And Milton Friedman said, well, no wonder people, you can fool some people for some time, but people are not that stupid that you can fool them, all of them, all the time. It doesn't work that way. So what the logic here was, well, if you increase inflation, then the real wages people get are actually reduced, right? You get still, it looked as if you get more money, your wage might go up, but you actually buy less for it because inflation eats up the purchasing power. So it could, like the story you can imagine, suddenly wages go up, and people who were sitting home before watching TV say, oh, I'm not crazy to watch TV anymore. It's too costly to watch TV. Opportunity costs are very high now. When I sit home, I actually lose a lot of money, which I could possibly get if I entered the job market, right? So Friedman said, well, okay, some people who were, for example, outside the job market believe they are earning more, they entered the job market. But then they discovered that actually it's only nominally more. It's more in terms of, litas or dollars or crowns, but it's not more in terms of real goods you can buy for it. And Friedman said, okay, this is the Phillips curve where you expected inflation, let's say 0, right here. But the real inflation was 2, not 0. So what happens is that once those people figure out that they were confused, they once again go back home and watch TV. So you have a shift in the Phillips curve this way. So the blue one is Phillips curve when the expectation is, let's say, 2. Right? People expect, it must be like this, right? People expect 2, and they are, as many of them are unemployed as before. So there is some kind of natural rate of unemployment. You can, by surprising people, you can, make them work. But when they discover that it was a trick, they go back home. So the long-term Phillips curve, but you know what I wanted. Phillips curve long term is vertical, and sometimes can be even upward sloping. But for our purposes, well, you can confuse people for some time, so short-term, cyclical develop your reality, but you cannot influence the level of unemployment by printing up more money in the long term, right? So now you see, you can compare these two things. Both Friedman, in Hayek, Mises, Garrison, Rothbard, Kirchner, say, yes, monetary policy can be confusing or source of confusion. When you surprise people, they behave for some time differently. You can, for some time, you can cause economic boom, let's say. More people will work, right? So it could look like a good situation. GDP can grow up for some time because you create new jobs here, which you can see here. Some people go and work, right? Unemployment can go down for some time. But then once you figure out it was a mistake, you adjust. So you move here to the Philip curve with expected inflation, which is now higher, or you go bankrupt, or here you go bankrupt, and you find your place somewhere else in the production structure. So both explanations say monetary policy can cause bubbles, ups and downs. It can, in short term, influence economy, but in long term, not really. Now, what is the difference? The difference is the following one, and it stems from a different perception of money by people like Friedman and all Chicago school, and people like Hayek, Mises, and the Austrian continental European school. If prices do not change, for Friedman, nothing is happening. Prices measured, for example, as a CPI, Consumer's Price Index, if that is zero, so if inflation, which you can read about in newspapers, is zero or something, you know, what people expect, anything actually what people expect, originally zero in my exposition here, no problem. Nobody is confused. Unemployment is at the level of natural rate of unemployment, no ups and downs, no cycles. No problem. Everybody happy. However, for Hayek, Mises, Garrison, see, we have never mentioned level of prices here. What we talked about was that the source of confusion was delta M, increase of the supply of money, new money printed or created by the banking sector. So for Hayek, or put it this way, in a growing or in a efficient economy, what do we see in terms of price moves? Take a cell phone. What is happening with prices of cell phones over time?
Falling.
They're falling. Why are they falling?
Depreciates. It's not new anymore. Technology goes
Yeah, but
forward.
okay, but talk about the new ones. Not that like the things get older. That's fine. But new cell phones are cheaper than the previous ones, even if they are better.
Because demand is lower. Everybody has cell
They're
phone.
more harmful. Improvement in production.
Yeah, productivity improvement. So everything gets cheaper and cheaper, PCs, CD players, cell phones, because they are so efficient, they are able to lower cost of production, and hence everybody benefits. So in an economy, when there are efficiency improvements, we should see falling prices everywhere. Where efficiency is underway, costs are falling slowly, and we should see falling prices. Why do we see it in the cell phone industry and not that much in the table industry.
The cell phone are new ones. Tables, they already have fallen.
But still get better. So somehow it should, the development does not stop, right? The point is that, once again, efficiency push prices down. Monetary policy pushes prices up. So if this is efficiency improvements, for cell phones, let's say, or make it bigger. So this is huge, wonderful technological improvements in the IT, cell phone, this kind of industry. And so this is a contribution of efficiency. This is a contribution of central bank, right? So this is, green is central bank or banking, inflation. This is efficiency. Now, this is cell phones. The downward pressure is stronger than the upward pressure. For tables, well, I don't know exactly, but central bank push up is still the same. However, the downward pressure is, how shall I do it? Well, simply this is, put it this way. This is tables, downward pressure, and let's say prices do not change, right? Tables are still same price. So central bank effect, efficiency effect, the net result 0 for, let's say, bread. Efficiency is still, fine, pushes prices down, but central bank still pushes them up, so bread gets more expensive, right? So you would have like falling prices here, cell phone industry, no change of prices, table industry, increase of prices in the bread industry.
You should have at the regulatory cost of in every particular industry, like in, for example, forest industry. Most of the forests are owned by the government and regulated by the government.
Okay, but that's an
kind of inefficiencies. But it
yeah, but that's another problem which exists. Yes, but doesn't would complicate it without adding us anything which we need now. Simply, my point is what Friedman sees are the blue arrows, changes of prices. If prices do not change, like the table, my table industry example, Friedman is happy. He says nothing wrong is happening in the economy. He would say only in the, let's say, bread industry, Friedman would say, oh, prices are going up, there is positive inflation, CPI is up, we might have the cycle, right? What is Hayek, Mises, Garrison? What do these people see? Well, they say, we explain the emergence of confusion and hence destruction of the natural structure of the economy. Anytime you have delta M here, that means anytime you have the green central bank upward pressure on prices in existence. This is what matters. That prices sometimes go up and down and sometimes are not changed. Well, that simply depends on how much the efficiency improvement effect pushes prices down. But that's not what is important. Important are the green arrows, not the blue arrows, right? So what you see here is that Friedman and people who operate in this framework, they simply do not see half of the problem. They see problem only sometimes, right? And when they see it in terms of one big variable, aggregate variable that is called unemployment. So they would say, all right, if it is not 5.5 but 3, it's too little, it should be up. Otherwise, you still have people who are confused. Whereas Mises, Hayek, Garrison say, no, the problem is the credit and monetary expansion, irrespective of what happens with prices, because merely the delta M is the source of the business cycle. And what matters is not some kind of overall number, whether it is 5 or 3, but what is at stake is the destruction of the complicated structure of the economy. Capital structure is important, and you may see here like labor market, supply and demand for labor, wages and quantity of labor, here, 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 here. So Mises, Hayek, and there they see labor market, people who work within the capital structure, which Friedman does not see, and they see the evil of inflation that is pumping up money into the economy, which Friedman doesn't see. He deals with aggregate unemployment, and he deals with CPI, that means consumer prices only, right? At least, in the sort of textbook version of all this. So I would say there are a couple of things which we should remember. I started with talking about prices, how important it is for the overall coordination of the economy. Because economists understand how prices are important. They are always the ones who say, oh, if somebody is meddling with prices, if somebody is politically influencing the structure of prices, it is very dangerous, because we see our reality through prices. If central bank is destroying the price signals of the price system, we'll waste a lot of resources, we will get poorer, right? Not only are there effects because of the destruction of the quality of prices, but the central bank activities they do not only make us poorer because of discoordination, because we do not see reality well, because prices are wrong. They also cause the perpetual ups and downs in the economic development. They cause masses of people to commit errors because they are confused by the monetary expansion. So these monetary expansions cause for some time excitement, but then cause a lot of harm and hardship for people, both employers who lose money because they start projects which cannot be finished, and for employees who lose jobs, who start first working in new wonderful jobs, but then they lose it. And they have to move somewhere to find a reasonable job, which indeed is costly and it can last some time. So, like common people suffer as a result. The more governments intervene, and the more rounds of inflation they produce, the longer the crisis is, because the more first misperception happens and later adjustments, the more adjustments must be made, right? So today's governments typically, they say, oh, we need to solve crisis by pushing interest rates down, so monetary expansion and fiscal stimulus, that's what saves the day. People who understand that the economy is not some kind of one big thing, but a lot of small things. There are this structure of production coordination that needs to take place. They say, no, that's not the right way. The longer you do this politically motivated policy which confuses people, the harder it'll be to adjust ultimately. So inflation is harmful for many reasons. It causes cycles, it causes unemployment, it makes people believe ultimately that capitalist economy is just a messy economy when you always have crisis, right? This is what Marx believed, you know, capitalism is evil because you always have these ups and downs, you have masses of unemployed and so on and so forth. It is what capitalism is about. Mises Hayek and scholars in that tradition say, no, you have ups and downs, but the state, the government, the central bank is responsible. Without it, yes, some people always commit mistakes, but not a lot of people at once, right? That can happen only if you confuse them by monetary policy. You create bubbles by pumping money into the economy, and that's very harmful. So, and the inflation is not price changes, it's quantity of money changes. Price changes are the consequence of quantity of money changes. So what's harmful is that somebody has the right to simply put a piece of paper and stamp a couple of zeros on it, so create a banknote out of nothing. Then you take this banknote, you go to a shop, and you buy real stuff. To produce a banknote cost you, pretty much nothing, like 10 euro cents or something, right? And if you put some zeros on it, you can buy a computer for it, right? What sort of activity is it? Right? You spend, 1 euro, if it's much less, and you buy a valuable stuff. Other people, if they want to buy a valuable stuff, they need to work. They need to offer something in exchange, right? So, that's how a standard economy looks like. Everybody specializes on something useful, and then they exchange useful things, and they benefit each other. But central banks are a special kind of entrepreneurs. They are privileged by government. Nobody else can do it. They have a monopolistic privilege. And their kind of entrepreneurial activity is very strange, because if you did the same, you'd be put to jail. Right? If you take a copy machine and make a couple of copies of your litas and then went and bought a new stuff, what would happen? Right? You'll be caught and very strictly punished, and the argument will be, well, you are a thief, you are a counterfeiter, you are sort of stealing other people's products. Right? Other people work and you just make a copy of your banknote. It can't be so, because if everybody behaved that way, nobody would produce anything. Well, if that is a problem, yes, that's a problem. Then it is identical problem if central bank employee does that. Right? Imagine you work for a central bank in this office for printing money, or whatever you call it here. Imagine you work hard, start working at 8, and you go home at 4 in the afternoon. It's all fine, legal, called monetary policy. Then one day you say, oh, I really like my job, and I will overstay. I work 1 extra hour, and instead of giving the money to that smart guy, the central banker, to allocate it within the industry as he sees fit, which is called monetary policy, I will allocate it myself. After all, I'm smart too. I can also support different businesses and industries. If his activities are beneficial, my are as well, right? And if it was true that what he is doing is beneficial, then you are right. It doesn't make it harmful if it was beneficial till 4, and you produce the same banknote in 405, you know, it doesn't start to be harmful just because it's 5 minutes later, right?
You mean just to take some banknotes and support Ferrari or Lamborghini business by buying a new car for yourself?
Yeah, will cause, if you do that, if you do this activity which is illegal,
It's actually you can
you will benefit yourself.
So you benefit yourself, but you also support their business.
Yeah, yeah. That you buy Lamborghini, which now will not be available for somebody else because you bought it. So the remaining Lamborghinis will be scarcer. It would push prices up. And this is my point. By printing up more money and buying stuff, you increase scarcity of the remaining stuff, and hence the original act of inflation, printing up new money, causes prices to go up, right? And what I'm telling you is that the whole story is captured by Mises Hayek, because they say quantity of money first, increase of prices later, and you do not really see it in many other authors because they somehow believe that prices go up miraculously, right? And I want you to understand the kind of economic explanation, which simply is a different one than the legal one, right? Yes, lawyers will tell you that as long as you work for the central bank till 4 in the afternoon, that's legal. After 4, it's illegal. Yes, that's true. That's a legal analysis. Economic analysis is, well, what an economist is interested in is what happens if an extra banknote gets printed. What are the consequences? And it doesn't really matter whether it is legal or illegal, whether some people voted on it or somebody just decided, whether it was, you know, simply the legal context is different. Economic understanding is also different. Something can be harmful and legal, harmful or illegal, or the other way around, right? And once again, my point is, inflation is evil in both cases, even if it's legal or illegal. It doesn't really matter. We should primarily understand what consequences does it have? What happens if you print up new money? And the Hayek-Mises theory that got rewarded by the Nobel Committee is that it causes, through this mechanism, a cyclical fluctuation of economic output. It causes unemployment, it causes a lot of hardship. And this is something which you do not hear often today, though the current crisis, the bubble, can be very nicely captured by this sort of, let's say, model, right? You do not hear about Hayek today, and his sort of solutions to the problem. What you hear too often about is more money needs to be printed, more deficits must be operated, more money must be spent, because only spending will bring us out of recession. Hayek said, the more spending you do, the deeper into the recession you get, the more trouble you will have in the future. It can have short-term effects, these, you know, packages, deficits, scrapping bonuses and all this nonsense, but it doesn't have long-term positive effects. It's only negative. And you see it only when you have the microeconomic view. You need to see what happens within the economy. It's not sufficient to talk about unemployment rate and inflation rate. I'm done for now.